purchasers of Russian oil and gas. It's carefully crafted to make sure we are not hitting our allies and that we are hitting China and India. Let's be really blunt. China and India are the main culprits here. They purchase the vast majority of oil and gas. They are fueling Russia's war machine, and they are doing us no favors anywhere else in the world.
The United States has just moved one step closer to turning India's Russian oil purchases into a trade weapon. The US Senate has advanced a Russia sanctions bill with an overwhelming 86 to 12 vote. It could give Donald Trump the power to impose 100% tariffs on countries buying Russian energy. Now, India is one of the biggest buyers in the crosshairs, along with neighbor China. But this is not a 100% tariff on India just yet. The bill still has to clear a couple of more hurdles in Washington. But the bill has landed at the worst possible moment, right when Delhi and Washington are days away from sealing a trade deal. So the question is simple. What happens if it becomes a law eventually? Can India keep buying Russian oil without risking its US trade deal? Or is this bill about squeezing India at the negotiating table? So let's get to what's driving the news first and what the US Senate has approved. The Senate has fast-tracked the Lindsey Graham Sanctioning Russia and Iran Act of 2026, setting a very strict timeline for debate ahead of a final floor vote. The timing is symbolic. The vote comes as the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Washington and on the day of Senator Lindsey Graham's funeral. Now, Graham had spent months pushing the legislation and had secured President Trump's support before his death. The bill targets Russian officials, banks, oligarchs, and the shadow fleet. But its most consequential provision for India is the secondary tariff threat. The president, which is Donald Trump, could impose tariffs of up to 100% on imports from the 5 largest buyers of Russian oil. And which are these countries? China, India, Slovakia, Hungary, and Azerbaijan. Now, earlier drafts of this bill going back to last year spoke of 500% tariff. That's been scaled down to 100%. There's also an Iran angle. Sanctions on Tehran were added at Trump's request as the US war with Iran enters its 6th month. So why is India exposed? Well, Russian crude has become a major pillar of India's energy security since the Ukraine war. European sanctions and the G7 price cap system pushed Russia to redirect crude towards Asian buyers. Now, India stepped in and became one of Moscow's biggest customers. The scale today is enormous. Kepler data shows that Russia supplied about 2.61 million barrels per day to India in June. That was roughly 52.4% of India's total crude imports in that particular month. Russian oil shipments jumped 39% month on month from May. For India, this is not simply about friendship with Moscow, it's about economics. Discounted Russian crude has helped Indian refiners manage their import bill, protect refining margins, and maintain energy supplies. But even that advantage is changing. In July, the discounts that once made Russian crude especially attractive began disappearing as Middle East supply disruptions pushed global buyers towards Russian barrels. So India is facing pressure from both sides. Washington wants less Russian oil. The global oil market is making Russian crude less cheap. Yet, Russia remains a major source of supply. Now consider what a 100% tariff could actually mean. Washington could effectively say that India can continue buying Russian oil, but Indian exporters will face punitive tariffs when they sell into America. So that creates a brutal calculation for New Delhi. India's trade relationship with the US is huge. America is one of India's largest export markets. A tariff of 100% on Indian goods could make many Indian exports commercially unviable, uncompetitive in the US. So, India and the US have simultaneously been negotiating a bilateral trade agreement for months. As of late July, both sides described the deal as parked at the quote unquote last 1% of legal text. So, we are close, this close, but it's not signed yet. Washington had already eased its reciprocal tariffs on Indian goods from 25% down to 18%. Both countries have set a target, Mission 500, which is to double two-way trade to $500 billion by 2030. Now, a temporary tariff arrangement between the two nations expired on July 24th, and now fresh duties of 10% have already kicked in on a chunk of Indian exports. Now, into this delicate, almost finished negotiation, the Senate has now dropped a bill that talks about 100% tariffs for purchasing Russian oil. Now, the bill has a long road to cover before it gets real. It needs to clear the full Senate, then the House, which returns in September, and then it needs Trump's signature. But one thing is clear, the bill is less about punishing Putin and more about handing Trump a bigger stick to use in every trade conversation he's having right now, including with India. Look at the pattern. India gets hit with tariffs for buying Russian oil. Oil it needs because of a crisis triggered by the US in the Middle East. India gets pushed to close a trade deal, then watches a 100% tariff bill move through the Senate in parallel. And Washington still leaves the final call entirely with one man, which is the president himself. It was never really about Ukraine or its war with Russia. Now, Delhi has navigated tariff threats before. This one just landed at the most sensitive possible hour. This is Times Access, where global stories meet India's perspective. Click on the bell icon to subscribe because the next big global shift will have India at its center.